At the tender age of 15, I found myself in a harsh predicament that seemed more like a tale of old rather than a reality. Cast out by my parents for being too frail to toil on the farms that dot the rural landscape of Arkansas, I felt my world crumble. In this part of the country, where the soil and the sun shape the daily lives of its inhabitants, children are often expected to follow in the footsteps of their elders, tilling the land from a young age. Education is a luxury few entertain, and unfortunately, my parents were not among the enlightened few who valued it. Despite my keen interest in learning and a desire to rise beyond the confines of farm life, my dreams were dashed shortly after I celebrated my 15th birthday. My father, without farm of his own, dealt in the produce delivery, but decided that it was time for me to abandon school and join the ranks of painter on a vast, sprawling farm owned by a friend of his. However, my body could not meet the grueling demands of farm work. On my very first day, I collapsed from exhaustion, stirring a whirlwind of concern, and ultimately leading the ranch manager to refuse further risk by employing me. This decision did not sit well with my parents, who had hoped I would quickly return to work. Their attempts to find another employer for me failed, as word of my fainting spread swiftly through the community, and no one else dared take the risk. Back home, tension escalated. My presence seemed to only irritate my parents further. They criticised me incessantly, and even reduced my food rations, as if I consumed more than my share of resources by merely existing. In desperation, I proposed the idea of returning to school, hoping education would be my escape and a path to a better future. This suggestion was met with disdain and a violent rebuff from my mother, further sealing my fate as unwelcome in my own home. Eventually, I found sanctuary with my uncle, a more compassionate relative who later passed away, leaving me his house. It was then, living in a place of my own and out of the shadows of relentless hardship, that my parents began to seek a re-entry into my life. Now, as I ponder their motives, I'm left to reconcile my tumultuous past with the possibilities of a future that I once thought unreachable, yet one that I have begun to forge on my terms, grounded in the resilience of a spirit they could not break. My story begins with a stark warning from my father. If I didn't find a job within a week, he would kick me out of the house. Unfortunately, the week passed without any job prospects, and true to his word, my father forced me out. At first, my parents pretended to ignore my plight, but behind the scenes, they were already orchestrating my departure. I was taken aback when I saw JPO, Child Protection Officer, at our doorstep. My parents had reached out to them, claiming they were unable to provide for me anymore, and suggesting I be placed in a foster home or orphanage. The JPO officials came to verify whether my parents were genuinely incapable or simply shirking their responsibilities. As I overheard them, my parents explained their dire financial straits, admitting they could barely support my younger brother and me. They felt they had to choose between us, and they chose my brother. The JPO team decided that before moving forward with the option of foster care or an orphanage, they would first see if any of my parents' relatives could take me in. My father mentioned his cousin, Uncle Michael, who lived in the city, but he was unsure if Michael could or would take me. He hadn't been in touch with Michael for over 7 years, relying on outdated information to assess Michael's situation. Uncle Michael, unlike my father, valued education and had even considered pursuing a master's degree but lacked the funds. After failing to find a job post-college, Uncle Michael struggled, which only fueled my father's resentment as he viewed academia as a waste of time. This tension reached a boiling point when my father demanded Michael leave our home because he couldn't support him anymore. Michael left for the city and never looked back. Now, the JPO planned to contact Uncle Michael, and I was anxious about his response. Given their strained relationship, would he be willing to take me in, the son of the cousin who had turned him away? After years of silence, the answer came. To everyone's surprise, Uncle Michael agreed to take me in. My parents were shocked, having expected him to return their harshness with coldness. As I prepared to leave my home and start a new chapter with Uncle Michael, my parents coldly remarked that I would likely fail like him. These harsh words left a deep impression on me. Now, at 21, reflecting back on these events, I realise how life's challenges and the actions of others shape our paths in unforeseen ways. Uncle Michael's willingness to rise above the past and help me has taught me about forgiveness and resilience. As I continue on my journey, I carry these lessons with me, hoping to prove that kindness can indeed triumph over bitterness. I vividly remember the day JPO Child Protection Officer came to take me away to live with Uncle Michael. It was an emotionally charged day, especially for my little brother William. As I was led away, he chased after me, clinging to me tightly and crying, pleading for me not to go. The pain of leaving him behind was unbearable, and I couldn't help but cry along with him. Our parents quickly intervened to separate us, maintaining a composed facade to avoid giving JPO any negative impressions about their parenting. They reassured William and me that this separation was for the best, but I knew the reality would be harsh for William, likely facing our father's strict discipline once I was gone. The journey to Uncle Michael's house was filled with anxiety. Upon arrival, Uncle Michael greeted me with joy, which I initially suspected was a show for JPO. However, after a brief talk with the officials, they left, and I braced myself for what I thought would be a difficult transition. To my surprise, Uncle Michael was genuinely concerned, noting how thin I had become. He showed me to my room and immediately cooked a delicious meal, the likes of which I had never had at home. If this was what being a failure looked like, as my parents had often labelled Uncle Michael, then I was more than okay with it. After finishing my meal quickly, Uncle Michael served me more without even needing to ask if I was still hungry. That afternoon, I took a long nap, which was followed by a heartfelt conversation with Uncle Michael about everything that had happened. Uncle Michael was disappointed with my parents' actions, suggesting that if it weren't for the legal implications of abandonment, they might not have even involved JPO. He wasted no time enrolling me back in school. Without any children of his own and not currently pursuing marriage, Uncle Michael was focused on his career and mentioned considering a surrogate in the future. 2 years passed without any contact from my parents. Their lack of concern only solidified their neglect, which prompted Uncle Michael to confront them. On the day we went to visit, his car was out of service, so we took a taxi. Arriving at my parents' home, it was William who opened the door. I was struck by how much healthier I looked compared to him. Living with Uncle Michael had clearly been beneficial for me. William, cautious and subdued due to our parents' influence, only managed a small smile. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. My mother's sarcastic greeting suggested that Uncle Michael might be tired of me, implying I was a burden. This stung deeply, but Uncle Michael immediately defended me, telling my parents that my improved well-being was a testament to their failure in parenting. My father retorted that I was merely depleting Uncle Michael's resources. After a brief and heated exchange, Uncle Michael and I left, my heart heavy with the unresolved tension and William's silence, a clear sign of the pressure from our parents. Now, at 21 and in college, I reflect on those turbulent times with a sense of clarity about the impact of Uncle Michael's kindness and the stark contrast with my parents' indifference. Living with Uncle Michael not only provided me with stability, but also taught me the value of kindness and the importance of standing up for oneself. I'm deeply concerned about my younger brother William's well-being. Despite it being 5 weeks since Uncle Michael and I last visited my parents, I couldn't shake off a troubling feeling. Uncle Michael noticed my moodiness immediately and, upon questioning, I confessed to him that the visit had left me uneasy. William, who is full of dreams and aspirations, is stuck in an environment where his potential is stifled. My parents, who have little regard for education, seemed indifferent to William's ambitions, making our sibling bond feel strained and distant. Uncle Michael acknowledged the grimness of William's situation, but reminded me that there wasn't much to be done while William was under our parents' guardianship. I, however, couldn't accept that. If my parents had been willing to let me go, perhaps they'd be open to letting William move to the city with us. Uncle Michael was sceptical. He pointed out that while he was open to helping William, he believed our parents wouldn't easily relinquish their hold. Armed with determination, I visited my parents again. This time, only my father and William were home. I broached the subject of William moving to the city with me, hoping he could escape to a better environment and pursue his education. My father remained silent for a long time after my proposition, then questioned whether I doubted his intentions for William. Choosing to avoid confrontation, I explained that I was considering what William wanted for himself. This seemed to upset my father further. He insisted that his plans for William were superior to any dreams William might have had for himself. William, standing beside us, began to sob quietly. Frustrated and bold, I challenged my father's approach, warning that it could lead William to resent them in the future. Dismissively, my father claimed the opposite would be true, that William would thank him later. The conversation ended with my father demanding that I leave and never return. As I walked away, I realised Uncle Michael had been right. Nevertheless, I was not ready to give up on William. He was only 16, and in 4 years, he would be old enough to make his own decisions. My hope clung to the possibility that he would still yearn to pursue his education, not succumbing to the narrow path our parents favoured. Fast forward 2 years from that update, and here I am at 24, financially secure, though not through my own efforts, but due to unforeseen circumstances. Our life with Uncle Michael continued quietly until I noticed a decline in his health. Despite my concerns, Uncle Michael assured me there was nothing to worry about. He often spoke of finding strength in life's challenges, conversations that seemed out of character at the time, but later revealed their depth. As I sit here typing with a net worth of just over $100,000, thanks to Uncle Michael's guidance and perhaps unforeseen inheritance, I feel a mix of gratitude and heaviness. While I've achieved financial stability, my thoughts remain with William, still under our parents' roof. The challenge now isn't just about financial success, it's about ensuring that my brother can also find his way out and not be lost to our parents' damaging philosophies. As Uncle Michael taught me, it's about finding strength, even when you feel most alone. I remember the conversation vividly. Uncle Michael, noticing something was on my mind, asked what I would do if I inherited all his wealth. Eagerly, I shared my dream of starting a scholarship fund for kids in my countryside who, like me, wanted to pursue education but lacked the financial means. As I spoke, Uncle Michael suddenly began to cough. The cough persisted, so I quickly fetched him a glass of water. When I returned, I was alarmed to see his hand covered in blood as he reached for the glass. This was far more serious than I had thought. Once he seemed a bit more stable, I urged him to go to the hospital, but he remained unnervingly calm. It was then that he revealed he had been battling stage 4 lung cancer and that treatments had been unsuccessful. The doctors had given him only a few months to live. I was devastated. Desperate to help, I suggested seeking treatment at renowned medical centres around the world, but he gently explained that he had already explored many options, all confirming the same grim prognosis. Living with the knowledge of Uncle Michael's condition was torturous. Every day was a painful reminder of the limited time we had left together. Eventually, he was admitted to the hospital to put his affairs in order. During this time, he made it clear that he intended for me to inherit everything he owned, which turned out to be over $100,000. Despite the significant inheritance, I was too heartbroken to care about the money. Against Uncle Michael's wishes, I felt compelled to contact my parents. Despite our strained relationship, I hoped they might reconcile with him in his final days. Unfortunately, reaching out only confirmed their indifference and bitterness. My mother coldly passed the phone to my father, who, upon hearing why I called, angrily accused me of seeking money for medical expenses. His heartless response crushed me. I regretted not heeding Uncle Michael's advice. Uncle Michael passed away later that week. We had discussed the importance of staying strong, but his death hit me harder than I had anticipated. No amount of preparation seemed enough to face the loss of someone who had become my world. As I reflect on these events, disobeying Uncle Michael's last wish haunts me. I had hoped for a moment of compassion from my parents, but their reaction only deepened the wound. Now, as I carry on, I strive to honour Uncle Michael's legacy in ways that matter, focusing on the strength and resilience he instilled in me. After Uncle Michael passed away, I made the decision not to inform my parents of his death, given their earlier indifference. Revealing that he had died felt unnecessary. I had never organised anything as significant as a funeral before, so I wasn't sure where to begin. Thankfully, once Uncle Michael's close friends learned of his passing, they stepped in and coordinated a dignified burial that honoured his memory. The funeral was held at a funeral home, respecting Uncle Michael's wish for a non-religious service followed by cremation. As I stood by his coffin, the reality of his departure hit hard. Seeing him so peaceful, as though just asleep, was surreal and heart-wrenching. I found a quiet corner to gather my thoughts and let my emotions flow, but my solitude was interrupted by a voice I knew all too well. It sounded like my father. Turning around, I was shocked to see my parents mingling with Uncle Michael's friends, attempting to appear close to him. The grief I felt quickly turned into anger. As I approached them, my mother questioned why I hadn't informed them of Uncle Michael's death. I bluntly told her that Uncle Michael wouldn't have wanted them there. She protested, but I was distracted by the ceremony's continuation. It was time for the cremation. Despite my upset, I temporarily set aside my feelings about my parents' presence to focus on honouring Uncle Michael. After the cremation, I invited the attendees back to Uncle Michael's house for refreshments, a place he had proudly built and now belonged to me. My parents, among the guests, were visibly surprised by the beauty and grandeur of the house. Confronted by their curiosity, I confirmed that the house was indeed Uncle Michael's creation, but now mine. When my mother skeptically asked if I was serious, I affirmed, revealing that Uncle Michael had also left me a substantial inheritance. This news visibly shook them. Their surprise turned to an awkward attempt to reassert their parental authority, but I was resolute. I asked the security to escort them out, emphasising that this was in line with what Uncle Michael would have wanted. After the brief chaos, I apologised to the other guests, reassuring them that everything was now under control. This experience has only strengthened my resolve to live a life that honours Uncle Michael's memory and the values he instilled in me. Looking ahead, I plan to change my name and, hopefully, by next year convince my brother William to come and live with me, away from the toxic environment our parents create. I'm grateful for the support I've received from friends and the community throughout these challenging times. Your support has been invaluable,